Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby and today I have for you my June wrap-up video to talk about all the books that I read in the month of June. And I read 10 books. Isn't that exciting? I'm excited to share with you everything I read. This was a really good reading month. I really liked what I read, so let's just get into it. Let's just go. So the first book that I read in the month of June was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This will be the third video in a row where I mentioned The Poet X. So instead of just talking incoherently about how much I loved it to the camera, I actually have some coherent thoughts to say about it today. Aren't you proud of me? So if you don't know what The Poet X is about, it's about a Dominican 15-year-old girl, Xiomara Batista, living in New York City, and her very strict Catholic mother sends her to Sunday school. We've all been there, to prepare her for her confirmation. It's a Catholic thing. But the problem is Xiomara doesn't care about church or God. What she really cares about is poetry. And so this is a coming of age story that's all about finding your voice in the world and expressing your truth. So now that I've read all three of Elizabeth Acevedo's books, I can definitely say that I think this one is her best one. The book is really able to show the power poetry and words can have. Elizabeth Acevedo writes The Poet X with such authenticity and raw emotion. It is the kind of emotion that is angry and sad and heartbreaking, but at the same time also hopeful and awe-inspiring. Xiomara being a young black girl living in New York City, she's constantly being sexualized and harassed, and because of that it leaves her feeling powerless, it leaves her feeling angry and exhausted, it leaves her feeling uncomfortable with her body, her sexuality. I could empathize with Xiomara. I could understand the feeling to have to act tough even when you don't feel tough. I could understand what it feels like to be so angry and have no place to put any of that anger, and to feel uncomfortable with your body, your sexuality, all that, and all your feelings. Like, I could connect to it, I could empathize with it, I really felt for it. But what was truly beautiful and inspiring about this book is that it shows you how words and poetry could allow you to take something that makes you feel powerless and turn it into something that makes you feel powerful. And for Xiomara, it was her poetry, her spoken word, slam poetry. It was performing her poetry that allowed her to take ownership of all of those experiences and all those things and make them into something where she can feel seen in a way that she hasn't been seen before, seen in a way that feels most true to who she is as a person. And that is truly inspiring to read and powerful. It was so powerful. Also, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. If you didn't know, it's probably one of my new favorites. Okay, so the second book that I read this month was All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Now this book is a memoir manifesto all about George M. Johnson's experiences from elementary school through his college years, about being a black queer man, and it was really good. It was really good. I really liked it. I feel weird reading books based on people's like real personal experiences, because how do you rate someone's life? The book talks a lot about intersectionality of being black and queer. It talks about rigid gender roles. It talks masculinity, education, but most importantly, the book is very centered around family and community. And I really, really like that. George M. Johnson talks about how he's had a very strong support system throughout his young life, his formative years, and you can really tell when reading this memoir that his family played such an instrumental role in his upbringing, and it demonstrates how important support systems can be, especially when you are in a marginalized groups, especially multiple marginalized groups. What I really liked about this book most is that George M. Johnson talks about his own experiences with such clarity and such honesty, and no matter whether he's talking about a good or a bad experience, nothing he talks about feels like it's coming from a place of pain or brokenness, but rather it feels like he's talking about his past experiences from a place of acceptance. And I feel like to do that, that would take a lot of reflection and introspection, and yeah, I would highly recommend. So the third book that I read in the month of June was The Tyrant's Tomb by Riordan. So if you don't know what The Tyrant's Tomb is, it's the fourth book in the Trials of Apollo series. The Trials of Apollo series takes place after the Heroes of Olympus, when Apollo is struck down into Earth and turned into a human as a punishment from dear old dad Zeus, for reasons that I cannot say because you have to read the Heroes of Olympus, because spoilers. And he goes on many, many different quests over this series in order to eventually restore his godhood. And The Tyrant's Tomb, I think, is probably the best book in the series so far. I think I definitely like the second half of it more than the first half. Apollo as a character has come so far in his development, because this series is basically about someone slowly learning the nuances and complexities of human emotion, pain, guilt, fear, love, loyalty, loss, grief, so many different emotions, and Apollo's having to learn about it all over the course of these 4 books. I also think that this series has provided Rick with more of an opportunity to critique and point out some of the more problematic parts of Greek and Roman mythology, although not in any way that's too complex, because you know the young people still need to understand what's going on. But what I love most about this series as a whole is that Rick has managed to write a series that feels very unique compared to the other 2, while also still keeping a lot of the same story elements and hitting all of the nostalgia throwback points within them. And I think he does a really good job of that. So if you've read Percy Jackson and the Olympians, if you've read Heroes of Olympus, and you have not read this series, I highly recommend it because it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. I could list reasons of why you should watch this, but I'm not going to right now. Wait, did I say why you should watch this? I meant why you would read this. Also, in this book, if you did not know, there is LGBT plus rep. Main character Apollo is bisexual. If you didn't know that, well, now you know. There's also a lesbian character in this book. There is also an ace character in this book, because it's not explicitly stated in the book, but then Rick confirmed it on Twitter, so I was like, well, cool. Now, I could go on about why I love that so much because it makes literally so much sense. I just realized I didn't hold up The Tyrant's Tomb while I was talking about it. Okay, well, I'm dumb, but we're gonna move on. So the 4th book that I read is The Deep by River Solomon, and this is a novella about an underwater society of mermaid-like creatures called the Wajanru, who are the descendants of pregnant slave women who were thrown off of slave ships. And it follows the main character Yetu, who is the historian of this society, and basically the historian is the person who holds all of the memories of their people's past within them. If I were to describe this novella in one word, it would be thought-provoking, because it was really thought-provoking. This has a lot of interesting themes, like talking about the importance of history and how history really shapes a people and a civilization. It also talks about the importance of memories and the extremes of having literally all the memories and having none of the memories, and trying to balance those extremes. It also talks about the effects of trauma, of holding literal generations of trauma, and the psychological effects that come with that: dissociation, anger, loneliness, alienation, depression, social anxiety, among other things. There's also this contrast between loneliness and belonging, and what it means to truly belong somewhere. And there's this really great quote about loneliness and belonging, but I'd have to find it. The writing in this novella is so good and so beautiful. There are some really, really great quotes in here. I was underlining things probably on almost every other page. I will also mention that Jessie over on their channel, Bow Ties and Books, mentioned this book on their channel and said that there was a autistic and ace-coded character within it. I am assuming they are talking about the main character, because I can see how Yetu could be coded as being autistic. I did not get the ace rep. I did not get the asexuality, because I don't know, I just didn't interpret it like that. I don't know, maybe I'm just dumb and it just went whoop. But if you've read this, let me know. Did you read her character as asexual? Because I did not. I will say that she's not straight. I will say that. She's not straight. Also, River Solomon is a non-binary author, and they have another book in Unkindness of Ghosts, which hopefully I will be getting to soon, because if this is any indication, their writing is really beautiful, and I've heard really great things about Unkindness of Ghosts. Unkindness of Ghosts. Yes, I can speak. So maybe I'll be reading that this month. We'll see. Okay, so the 5th book that I read this month were comics / graphic novel, and it was Avatar: The Search, parts 1, 2, and 3. If you remember, I count parts 1, 2, and 3 all as one book because they're all very, very short, and so together they're basically just the size of one book. Yeah, I really, really liked Avatar: The Search. I think I definitely liked it better than The Promise. It centers around Zuko and him dealing with his relationship with his family and trying to figure out how to navigate that, given the fact that his family is extremely dysfunctional. So we see a lot of him dealing with his relationship with his sister Azula and trying to figure out all of that. Also, we see Aang dealing with his own stuff and once again struggling with his own personal feelings and his duties as the Avatar. And at the end, Aang actually does something that actually surprised me, that I wasn't expecting. But I mean, I guess it makes sense given his development, and hopefully this move means that he is slowly becoming more and more confident in his decisions as the Avatar. It actually surprised me. I was not expecting that. So I'm excited to read more. I'm sad because I think the next comics don't have Zuko in it, so that's sad. But hopefully Toph will be back, because Toph was not in this one. So the 6th book that I read this month was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. If you don't know what Clap When You Land is about, it's basically about these two half-sisters. One of them lives in the Dominican Republic and one of them lives in New York City, but neither of them know of the other's existence until one day their father dies in a plane crash heading over to the Dominican Republic. And so the story is basically about them dealing with their grief and eventually discovering that the other exists and trying to deal with the aftermath of their father's death and having to confront the secrets about him that are being revealed. So I think I like this slightly better than With a Fire on High. I don't know. It's very hard to tell. I think I like this slightly better. But not by that much. It's almost equal, almost. The Podex is definitely the best. There's no question about that. What I really love specifically about this book is that it's very female-centric. There's no unnecessary romance with any of the guys. Not that any of the romances in her other books are bad, but like, it's just, I like that it wasn't here because obviously it wasn't needed here. And also most of the main cast of characters are women. There's not really any important male characters other than their father, who is dead, so he doesn't really count. And I guess the main antagonist of the novel, all the protagonists are women, and so I really like that. So while this book is centered around the grief over a dead father, it is also very much about the importance of female familial bonds. And I think I talked about what I really liked about this book in the most succinct way possible on Booksloth, of all places. I don't know, I was just on Booksloth and I was putting this as read, and then I guess the words just came to me and I just typed up a short little review of what I liked about it. So follow me on Booksloth. I keep forgetting to say that and to mention that I have a Booksloth, but I have one. I use it sometimes, so here is what I said about that. I said, Clap When You Land is, and I quote, a story about grief and loss that teaches us the ways the pieces someone leaves behind can be picked up by those around them to create something wholly new and beautiful. It, quote, includes a full female cast of characters that demonstrates the strength of family and sisterhood. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this book. You should definitely read it. I highly recommend. I really want to read the audiobook to this because I feel like I will enjoy the audiobook even more and maybe actually even cry this time around reading the audiobook. So I want to eventually read that. But yeah, I really like this. So the 7th book that I read this month was The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin, and ooh, this book was so I finished this book and I was like, oh my god, that was so good. I was very excited, especially with the cliffhanger at the end. So if you don't know what the 5th season is about, it is set in this world that's ravaged by climate disaster, and so every so often the earth goes through what the people call 5th seasons, where there's some kind of natural catastrophe and civilization is essentially thrown into survival mode. And so the book follows 3 women in different stages of their life just trying to survive in this world. And it was really good. But this book was also really dark. It is an adult fantasy novel, but just know it's very dark going into it. I think one of the main themes of this book is talking about what it's like to live in a society where essentially you're treated as a slave, where you're treated as less than human, when your value is only measured by how useful you can be. And it's also about what it means to be faced with the kind of hatred that is so systemic that it would drive a father to kill his own child. This group, the Origins, the one with special, the Origins basically have this special powers over the earth, but they are treated as less than human and treated as monsters, essentially. And what is so disturbing about this book is that it is a very clear parallel to things in real life and to real things from our history, i.e. slavery, i.e. the discrimination and racism that still exists today, the struggles of marginalized groups, especially Black people. They're very obvious parallels, and I can only assume that it was very intentional given that N.K. Jemisin is a Black author. So the 5th season is a book that is centered around this marginalized group, the Origins within this world, who are just trying to survive in a world where they are faced with so much hatred and a people who would either see them submit or die. So just a quick heads up, there are a lot of trigger warnings in this book. It is an adult fantasy. There's a lot of violence and a lot of things. So violence, death and loss of a child. There's emotional abuse, physical abuse. There's mention of child rape. There is child exploitation. There's a lot of messed up things in this book, but none of the terrible things we see in this book are glorified or anything. Everything is depicted as disturbing and disgusting and horrific as it actually is. And yeah, but just warning for those things when you're going into it. The world building in this book is very well crafted, although I think what makes this fantasy book stand out the most is the writing. I think the writing is very unique. I really like how N.K. Jemisin tells the story. I think her storytelling is very much the opposite. The opposite? Do I even speak words? I think her writing is very much the opposite of info dumpy, whereas she'll just leave you clueless and confused, like just as confused as the main characters, and even more so because she doesn't waste time explaining every single basic thing to know about the world, so you kind of just have to go with it, and then eventually it'll make sense to you as you keep on going. But she's not afraid to leave her characters in the dark, or to leave her readers in the dark, but also her characters in the dark, because there are so many points in this book where the characters are just as confused as you are, because a lot of the characters a lot of times just react to crazy shit that's happening, and they're just like, what just happened? What's happening? Huh? Also, I think I just really like N.K. Jemisin has this way of writing where the tone is sometimes very sarcastic and kind of funny, and she has these little one-liners that I just think are amusing and funny. And I know those are all they're very little subtle things, but put together I just really liked it. Also, one of the perspectives is written in second person, which is really interesting because it adds to the whole mystery of the novel. And I really like the reveals, especially the cliffhanger, because N.K. Jemisin, she gives hints foreshadowing the reveal, which I really like that, like the very last sentence of the book. You may be able to predict what it's all about, but you may not be able to figure out why. So like the last sentence of the book, if you know, you know. I guessed it had something to do with that because she was giving what I thought were pretty obvious hints, but I still have no idea why. I have a theory as to why that is important and why it matters. So we will see. But there was only one reveal that kind of felt a little out of nowhere to me. I was like, what? Wait, how did she figure that out? There was only one reveal that I was kind of thrown off by, but honestly, that's a very nitpicky critique. It wasn't Like, that's literally my only critique out of the entire novel. This was a really good novel. It was a really good fantasy novel. Also, I really love Cyanite and Alabaster. They have really great banter, and I love how their friendship grows throughout the novel and things, and they're just like, I just really like them. Also, there's LGBT plus rep in this book, because there's a gay male character, there's a bisexual male character, there's a trans character, there's also a polyamorous relationship, so that was fun. But yeah. So the last 3 books that I read for this month were all graphic novels. There were 3 volumes of graphic novel series, and that was Heartstopper volumes 1, 2, and 3. And if you don't know what Heartstopper is about, basically it's about this gay boy named Charlie, and he befriends this guy named Nick, and as their friendship grows, Charlie begins to get feelings for Nick, and Nick also might be developing feelings for Charlie, but that can't be because Nick is straight, isn't he? And so the entire series is about them and their relationship, and when I tell you that these 3 volumes made me so happy, they made me so happy. They made me so happy. I read all 3 volumes in less than a day. I think I read them in like 7 hours. I was reading them nonstop for 7 hours, and it was like I was reading it and I could not stop smiling because it was just so good. I have never felt such pure joy and softness as I did reading Heartstopper. Needless to say, I really, really loved it. I think it was exactly what I needed in the moment. I really loved Nick's character and him trying to figure out his sexuality because it felt very authentic and very real. Nick and Charlie's relationship was just so good and so healthy and so wholesome and just perfect. So in these graphic novels, there's also a lesbian couple, there's also a trans girl character, there's also another gay male character. So just their whole friend group, just very gay. And they're just so cute, and like their friend group is great, and just, yeah. This makes me very excited to read Alice Oseman's other work. I've pre-ordered Loveless, and I'm going to be buddy reading that with Elise over at The Petite Punk. Okay, side note, I am so dumb because in my last video, I said, oh, Elise over at The Petite Pink, because I had really thought this whole entire time that her channel name was The Petite Pink. Even though I must have seen it so many times, my mind is blown. My mind is literally blown that I was getting it wrong so much. Elise over at The Petite Punk, we're gonna be buddy reading Loveless, I think, and so I'm also excited to read Radio Silence. I don't know if I'm gonna get to it this month. We will see. Those were all the books that I read in the month of June. I hope you all had a very happy Pride Month. I hope it was fun. I hope it was great. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked, leave a like. If you want to see more, be sure to subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!